When you step back and remove yourself from her life, something powerful begins to happen that most people don't understand at first. While you're gone, the noise disappears. The constant texts, the predictable presence, the emotional availability that once felt comforting slowly fades into silence. And in that silence, clarity starts to form. What she once took for granted now feels unfamiliar. Not because you were perfect, but because you were consistent. Human emotions often don't recognize value while it's being given freely. They recognize it when it's missing. At first, she may feel relief. That's normal. The absence can feel lighter in the beginning, almost freeing. There's no pressure, no expectations, no emotional responsibility. But relief is temporary. Once the emotional dust settles, the mind begins to compare. Moments you shared replay unexpectedly. The way you showed up, the support you gave, the stability you provided, things that blended into the background when you were always there, now stand out sharply. Absence doesn't erase memories. It sharpens them. When you were present every day, your value was hidden by routine. Predictability dulls emotional awareness. The brain adapts quickly to consistency and labels it as normal, even when it's rare. But when that routine breaks, the emotional system reacts. She starts noticing the space you once occupied, the messages that no longer come, the voice that no longer checks in, the energy that no longer surrounds her. And suddenly, what felt ordinary begins to feel important. This is where most people make the mistake of returning too soon. They panic, they reach out, they try to remind her of what they meant. But reminders weaken impact. True realization happens internally, without interference. When you stay away with calm confidence, you allow her emotions to do the work on their own. She doesn't feel pushed. She doesn't feel chased. She feels the absence, and that absence speaks louder than any explanation ever could. What makes absence powerful is not just that you're gone, but how you're gone. You don't disappear in anger. You don't vanish to manipulate. You step back with self-respect. You choose growth over reaction. That energy shift is felt even in silence. When she senses that you're not falling apart, not begging, not trying to pull her back, her perception of you changes. You're no longer the man who needs her attention. You become the man who has his own direction. Over time, the emotional weight flips. What once felt like freedom begins to feel like loss. She starts questioning whether walking away was the right decision. Not because you demanded answers, but because your absence created emotional contrast. She remembers how it felt when you were there, not in theory, but in emotion, the comfort, the presence, the sense of being chosen. And now she feels what life is like without it. This is the quiet stage where attachment resurfaces. Not loudly, not dramatically. It shows up as curiosity, checking in silently, wondering how you're doing, imagining what you're becoming. The mind fills the gaps with possibility, and possibility reignites emotion. And by the time she fully realizes what your presence meant, the dynamic has already changed. Because now, you are no longer trying to be understood. You are no longer trying to be chosen. You allowed absence to reveal what presence once hid. And that realization doesn't come from words, it comes from silence. And when absence is handled with strength, it doesn't push her away. It pulls her back. When you choose silence instead of reaction, something deeply psychological is triggered. Silence is not emptiness, it's a mirror. When you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your actions, and stop trying to control how she sees you, you remove the emotional distractions that once kept her from thinking clearly. Without constant communication, her mind no longer reacts outwardly. It turns inward, and that's where reflection begins. At first, your silence may confuse her. She expects a message, a reaction, a response, something familiar. When it doesn't come, the emotional pattern breaks. The brain doesn't like unfinished loops. It searches for meaning. She starts wondering why you're quiet, what changed, and what you're thinking. Curiosity replaces certainty. And curiosity is far more powerful than reassurance ever was. Silence also removes emotional resistance. When people feel pressured, chased, or emotionally cornered, their defenses rise. They justify their decision to leave by focusing on your flaws. But when you stop engaging, those defenses slowly lower. There's nothing to push against. No argument to win. No version of you to reject. The emotional walls drop because there's no longer a threat to her autonomy. In that emotional openness, memories resurface, not the arguments, not the tension, but the moments that carried emotional weight, laughter, connection, safety, shared vulnerability. These memories don't appear because you reminded her. They surface because the mind naturally revisits what once felt meaningful when silence creates space. The absence of new emotional input causes the brain to replay old emotional experiences, and those experiences carry feeling, not logic. This is where reflection turns into emotional questioning. She begins to reassess her decision, not immediately and not consciously at first. It shows up subtly, a sense of doubt, a moment of missing you at unexpected times, a comparison between you and others. Silence doesn't beg for validation, it invites evaluation. And evaluation leads to deeper emotional awareness. What makes silence so effective is that it shifts power. When you're always reacting, explaining, or proving, you stay emotionally available on her terms. Silence removes that availability. You're no longer accessible for reassurance or validation. You're no longer predictable. And unpredictability reactivates attention. The emotional dynamic flips from you trying to be understood to her trying to understand you. Silence also communicates strength without words. It says you respect yourself enough to walk away without drama. It says you trust your worth without needing approval. This kind of quiet confidence challenges the narrative she may have built about you. If she believed you would chase, your silence disrupts that belief. And when beliefs are disrupted, the mind is forced to re-evaluate reality. Over time, reflection deepens. She doesn't just think about what happened, she thinks about how she felt with you and how she feels without you. That emotional comparison becomes impossible to ignore. Silence gives her the emotional contrast she couldn't see while you were always present. The absence of your voice amplifies the emotional echo of your presence. Eventually, silence stops feeling like distance and starts feeling like loss. Not because you withdrew affection, but because you withdrew reaction. And when reaction disappears, reality becomes undeniable. She is left alone with her thoughts, her emotions, and the truth of what you meant. Because silence doesn't convince, it reveals. And what it reveals often changes everything. When you choose self-respect over desperation, the entire emotional dynamic changes. Most people think attraction is built through effort, attention, and constant reassurance. But real attraction is built through standards. The moment you stop chasing someone who chose to walk away, you send a silent message that your value does not depend on their decision. And that message is felt, even without words. Self-respect begins with restraint. You resist the urge to explain yourself again. You don't beg to be understood. You don't try to prove your worth to someone who already had access to it. Instead, you accept the situation with calm strength. This isn't weakness, it's emotional discipline. And emotional discipline is rare. When she sees that you can walk away without collapsing, it challenges the image she may have formed of you. You are no longer predictable, and predictability is the enemy of attraction. When you turn inward and begin rebuilding yourself, something powerful happens. Your energy shifts. You invest in your health, your mindset, your purpose, your growth. Not to impress her, but to align with who you know you can become. This internal shift reflects externally. Your posture changes. Your presence changes. Your confidence becomes quieter but stronger. And confidence rooted in self-respect is magnetic because it doesn't seek validation. Many men lose attraction because they shrink emotionally when they fear loss. They over-communicate. They over-apologize. They give more than they receive, hoping it will bring someone back. But over-giving communicates insecurity, not love. Self-respect says, I can care without losing myself. And that balance is what reignites attraction. As you grow, the contrast becomes unavoidable. She remembers the version of you that tried too hard, explained too much, and compromised himself to keep the connection alive. Now she sees or senses a version of you who stands firm. A man who doesn't chase, doesn't react impulsively, and doesn't need approval to feel complete. This contrast creates curiosity, and curiosity leads to emotional pull. What makes self-respect so powerful is that it restores polarity. Attraction thrives on polarity, strength and softness, presence and space. independence, and connection. When you place your self-worth back in your own hands, you stop leaning emotionally. And when leaning disappears, balance returns. She feels that you are no longer emotionally dependent on her response. And that independence makes you emotionally safe again, not needy, not demanding, but grounded. Self-respect also rewrites the story in her mind. Instead of seeing you as someone who lost her and is trying to get her back, she starts seeing you as someone who chose growth over attachment. Someone who respected himself enough to let go, and respect precedes desire. People are drawn back to what they admire, not what they pity. Over time, your absence combined with your growth creates tension. Not negative tension, but emotional tension. She begins to wonder how you're doing, what you're building, who you're becoming. And the more you rise, the more that tension grows. Not because you announced your transformation, but because real growth doesn't need to be advertised. It's felt. This is why women don't return to men who wait. Waiting communicates stagnation. Evolution communicates strength. When you evolve, you no longer seek closure, you become it. And in doing so, you shift from being an option to being a loss. Because self-respect doesn't chase attraction, it creates it. Attraction doesn't disappear because feelings die, it disappears because emotion becomes flat. Familiarity slowly drains intensity when nothing changes, when energy becomes predictable, when connection turns into routine. Many relationships don't end because of betrayal or lack of care, but because the emotional experience loses contrast. And when contrast disappears, desire fades. This is where transformation becomes powerful, not as a tactic, but as a shift in identity. When she left, part of the reason may have been emotional sameness. She knew how you would respond, how you would show up, how every conversation would go. Even stability can become invisible when it lacks depth or growth. But when you step away and begin evolving, you break that emotional pattern. You create contrast between who you were and who you are becoming. And contrast reactivates feeling. Emotional contrast works because the mind is wired to notice change. When something remains the same for too long, the brain categorizes it as safe and familiar, but no longer stimulating. Change disrupts that categorization. When she sees or senses that you are no longer the same man emotionally, mentally, or energetically, her perception shifts. The image she held of you no longer fits. And when perception breaks, emotion returns. This contrast doesn't come from trying to look different for attention. It comes from alignment. You think differently. You respond differently. You carry yourself with less urgency and more certainty. Your presence becomes calm instead of reactive. You don't chase conversations, you allow them. This new emotional posture creates a subtle shock. She expected you to stay the same, to be available in the same way, to react the same way, but you didn't, and that disruption is felt deeply. What makes this contrast powerful is that it touches memory. She remembers the man she walked away from, the version she believed she had figured out. Now she's faced with a man who doesn't fit that memory, someone more grounded, more self-directed, less emotionally exposed. The comparison creates emotional tension, and emotional tension is the foundation of renewed attraction. Contrast also reframes the past. When you grow, the moments you shared together take on new meaning. She begins to see your past efforts not as ordinary, but as rare. Your consistency becomes visible in hindsight. Your presence becomes valuable only after it's gone. And now, combined with your growth, that memory feels heavier. The past becomes emotionally charged because it's now contrasted with your present absence and evolution. This is where desire reawakens, not as nostalgia but as possibility. She doesn't just miss who you were, she wonders who you are becoming, and that curiosity fuels imagination. Imagination fuels emotion. Emotion fuels attraction. She starts projecting forward instead of looking back, and projection is far more powerful than memory. Many people fail here because they reveal their transformation too early. They seek validation, they want recognition. But true contrast is silent. It's felt in how you speak, how you move, how you no longer seek reassurance. When your energy changes, it's impossible to ignore. And because you didn't announce it, it feels authentic, not performative. Over time, this emotional contrast builds pressure. The safe, predictable version of you is gone. In its place is someone unfamiliar, confident, and self-contained. That unfamiliarity brings back emotional awareness. She starts questioning her certainty. The decision she once felt sure about now feels incomplete. Not because you asked for another chance, but because you changed the emotional equation. This is the moment where desire quietly reignites, not through words, not through persuasion, but through contrast. And contrast is what turns absence into attraction. Just because she looks fine doesn't mean she is. Just because she's smiling, posting, laughing, or acting unbothered doesn't mean the emotions disappeared. Real feelings don't vanish on command. They don't shut off because a decision was made. They don't disappear because someone says, "I'm done." What actually happens is quieter. Feelings don't die, they go underground. When a connection had depth, emotion doesn't leave immediately. It goes silent. It hides behind distractions, routines, and surface-level happiness. In the beginning, she may seem relieved, lighter, more social, more expressive online. That's often the phase people misread the most. They think visibility equals healing, but visibility is often avoidance. Staying busy keeps the mind from slowing down long enough to feel. Over time, distractions lose their power. The excitement fades. The noise quiets. And when life returns to stillness, late nights, quiet mornings, moments with no audience, that's when suppressed emotions surface. Not dramatically. Not all at once. They arrive as thoughts she didn't invite, memories that feel heavier than expected, comparisons she didn't plan to make. Your absence creates space, and space allows buried emotions to breathe. This is why acting fine doesn't mean moving on. It means coping. And coping is temporary. Healing requires confrontation. When she sees you moving forward without bitterness, without chasing, without needing her validation, it removes the illusion that she left behind something weak or broken. Instead, she's left with the realization that she walked away from something real. Emotions resurface most strongly when contrast appears. When she notices you're not waiting, not reaching out, not collapsing emotionally. When she senses that you're grounded, improving, and emotionally intact without her, it triggers something deeper than nostalgia. It triggers insecurity. Not toxic insecurity, but emotional uncertainty. The question forms quietly: did I misjudge his value? That question doesn't come from logic, it comes from feeling, and feeling doesn't need permission to return. The more composed you are, the louder her suppressed emotions become. Because she expected you to hurt publicly, to seek reassurance, to prove you cared. When you don't, it forces her to confront her own feelings alone. This is where people make another mistake. They assume silence means indifference. It doesn't. Silence gives emotion room to echo. Without constant reassurance from you, she no longer has emotional certainty, and uncertainty forces emotional awareness. She begins to feel the weight of what she lost, not because she misses attention, but because she misses the emotional safety and presence that no replacement fully provides. Her feelings resurface slowly, as curiosity, as concern, as moments of missing you without wanting to admit it, as checking in indirectly, as wondering if you've changed too much to come back. And those quiet feelings are stronger than loud ones, because they're honest. The key is that you don't interrupt this process, you don't demand clarity, you don't expose your emotions to test hers. You allow her feelings to rise naturally, without pressure. When emotions return on their own, they carry depth. When they're forced, they carry resistance. What she's experiencing isn't regret yet, it's realization. Realization that emotions don't disappear just because silence exists. In fact, silence often reveals what noise was hiding. Because feelings don't fade when you let go. They resurface when you move on. There is a paradox most people never understand until it's too late. The more you try to hold on, the faster you push away. The moment you truly let go, everything shifts. Letting go doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you stopped clinging. And clinging is what drains attraction faster than anything else. When you release the outcome, you reclaim your power. You stop measuring your worth by whether she comes back. You stop waiting for signs, decoding behavior, or living emotionally suspended. Instead, you return to yourself. Your focus moves from, will she return, to, who am I becoming? And that internal shift changes everything about how you show up in the world. True letting go is energetic, not verbal. You don't announce it. You don't say goodbye dramatically. You simply stop reaching. Stop explaining. Stop hoping she will validate your pain. This quiet acceptance creates emotional space, not just for her but for you. And emotional space is what allows polarity to return. You are no longer emotionally available on demand. You are self-contained. When she senses that you've let go, something unexpected happens. The safety of certainty disappears. She no longer knows where she stands with you. Not because you're playing games, but because you've genuinely detached from the outcome. And detachment is unsettling. When someone assumed you would always be there, the emotional dynamic reverses. Letting go also removes pressure. Pressure kills desire. When someone feels responsible for another person's emotional state, they instinctively pull away. But when that pressure vanishes, relief turns into reflection. She is no longer reacting to your needs, she's responding to her own feelings. And that distinction matters. This is often the moment she begins to feel drawn back, not to reclaim control, but to restore connection. The absence of expectation allows emotion to rise naturally. She feels free to choose rather than obligated to stay away. And choice is where desire lives. What makes this moment powerful is that you're no longer waiting for it. You've already moved forward. You've accepted the loss. You've rebuilt your life without leaving emotional doors open out of fear. And because of that, if she returns, it's not because you begged or waited, it's because she felt the shift. Letting go also changes how you would receive her if she came back. You are no longer trying to fix the past. You're no longer afraid of losing her again. You've already survived the loss. That emotional security makes you grounded, calm, and selective. And when someone senses that they are no longer your only option, they begin to value their place in your life differently. Ironically, the moment you no longer need her return is the moment it becomes possible. Not guaranteed, but possible. Because attraction thrives where freedom exists, not where attachment suffocates it. You didn't push her away. You simply stopped holding on. And if she comes back, it's not because you waited in silence hoping. It's because you let go and became someone worth returning to.